kind of help you out, make sure everything sounds the way you want it to. So the podcast that you did, was it just audio or was it video? Like, was it?
It was video. And then I'm trying to fix this one. Yeah, it
your
was.
phone right
Oh, there
there.
it goes.
There
It
you
just
go.
flipped. Yeah, it was more video, audio.
Okay,
They're from Baltimore.
right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that all of this is run, I, you're good. The way this is all run is that we're doing everything separate with audio and video. We won't be picking anything up from the cameras, even though it does record audio.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, just because there's no sound to clean up or anything like that, this is going to sound a lot better. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So, Bianca Vasquez, am I saying it right?
Yep.
Got you in here. What brokerage are you with again?
I'm with Realty One.
Realty One. So, Bianca and I met at a broker's open. Never really got to sit down, so you're seeing like a raw one-to-one. And just to give you a heads up, one of the things that we're trying to do here, in addition to just having a conversation about real estate, also want to make it somewhat entrepreneurial. So some of the questions I ask is just about how you're obtaining new business, building your business, all that kind of stuff, because I've had not only real estate agents, but we've had financial advisors, CPAs. We have a home inspector, a garage door company. So we're really trying to keep everything entrepreneurial, but then also making it a little real estate related, because what I've identified is that, a lot of buyers in the early stages of the process, they kind of almost want to troll, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to like call a real estate agent right away and ask what would probably be some really good questions. They want to troll us and then kind of get to know us without us knowing about it. So that's really what this is all designed to do, is to create content like that. So one of the number one things that I kind of, open with outside of your introduction is, we know that things have been a little slower in real estate in general. There's no secret. And keeping it entrepreneurial, what are some of the things that you're doing outside of the basics that are helping you get new clients?
So I think for me is digging deeper into my clientele, right? The people that have already closed with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking outside of the box. What can I do that's beneficial for them? And at the same time, it gives me an opportunity to network.
Sure.
We bought a mechanical bull.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just bought a mechanical bull. And like when our families have like housewarming parties, birthday parties, stuff like that, we go and we get to meet the people that are within their circle, right?
Yeah.
And it's not for me to go and prospect. It's just for me to be in front of people. Because in this type of market right now, a lot of agents are hiding. They're hiding out and they're waiting. We're hibernating, right?
Mm-hmm.
We end up finding ourselves hibernating. So my thing is if I'm in a rut, I jump in public. I get in public just so I don't feel the rut. Like, I'd rather feel it at night when I'm going to sleep, and the rest of the time we're gonna keep going.
And I'm assuming this mechanical bull, it's branded and everything like that.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. No, I like that. And I mean, to your point, you literally just jumped right into something that I've been talking to a lot of agents about, is that, I constantly am looking at real estate agents in regards to their production and everything along those lines, figuring out who good referral partners are going to be. And honestly, one of the main reasons why I wanted to have you on is because I noticed your social media is just fantastic. I mean, all the things you're doing, and you're really doing what you're saying, where you're out there. And I've noticed a lot of really good agents that, I like what you said, they're hiding, right? They're almost like, oh, I'm going to go on a vacation, or I'm going to wait until the business comes back. And only time will tell. But what I'm fearful of is that these agents, who I know are great agents, when things come back, it's almost like
they're out of the loop.
Well, not only are they out of the loop, but their clients maybe not forget about them. Like, they might remember them if they were asked, like, hey, who is your past real estate agent, right? But there's some statistic out there that states that, like, your clients kind of almost don't think of you after 90 days. And then even after 6 months, you run the risk of them completely not knowing you altogether.
Right.
And so with, the things that you're doing and staying top of mind, I love the mechanical bull idea. I mean, at the end of the day, you're letting everybody know, hey, I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
And I think there's something to be said for that, because nobody wants to work with like a agent that's kind of halfway in.
Right.
Right. And it seems to me that you're doing the opposite of that, and staying with the sphere and everything along those lines. And how's it working? I mean, do you feel like people are having those conversations with you? And
I think when we do have the mechanical bull, it's not about real estate. It's more about them and their people, their party. But people tend to always ask me, whether I'm in church, where I'm in the baseball fields, wherever I'm at, how's the market?
Right.
So that's just another opportunity to be in front of people. And when they ask me how's the market, that's when I can tell them, hey, you know what? There's a lot of people may see this as a doom and gloom. And then there's others where this is a window of opportunity.
Sure.
Because if the rates just drop 1%, our market's going to go crazy.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So my opportunity is not it's not who wants to buy. It's if you can afford it. And I think that's one thing. As I feel like no matter what, people are going to buy and sell. We just need to find those families that need the help, right? The ones that are close to a foreclosure right now, and they don't even know that they're sitting on $100,000 in equity, that they have an option. They have the opportunity of saving.
I got you. I mean, it's almost like we planned this. You're literally like going right into some of the things. And for the record, I mean, she and I just sat down, but I talked about this with another agent where people are always asking how the market is. And what is your opinion in regards to why you think people are asking that? Is it because they truly have some sort of interest? Do you feel like maybe it's just because they don't know what else to say to you? Like, what do you think that is? Because again, or is it maybe just to validate something that they thought and, they just want to go, yeah, I knew what I was talking about.
It's a combination of all of it, right? They're the boomers. They've been around. They've seen it happen. And so our millennials, Gen Z, they're doing the homework and they know what's going on for the most part because they're the ones that are doing the homework. The boomers are going off of natural instincts of what they do know, right? So I feel like there's boomers, Gen Z, they want to know. They're curious. They really do want to know. At the same time, they're looking at the numbers, the stats. At the same time, boomers want to tell them like been there, done that kind of thing. So I feel like it's a combination of everything. At the same time, there's people that are looking for those options. They really, really want to know. And when they ask you, I believe that that's a great opportunity to prove who you are as a real estate agent. Are you a sales agent? Or are you a good friend that really wants to make sure that someone makes the right decision when it comes? So whatever comes out of your mouth says who you are. And that's their opportunity to know which side do you stand on.
Well, and when you were mentioning it, you kind of talked a lot about people who might be in a position to where financially they're running into issues, but they're sitting on a boatload of equity, right? And I haven't asked anybody this question, but I literally have it written down, and it's something that I've been wanting to bring up. I don't know the answer to this one, but I kind of want to just chat a little bit about it. So hypothetically, if you're an individual right now who I think the average person right now in the U.S. is technically, I think the number is like $30,000 to $35,000 in credit card debt right now.
Yeah.
Right now, that's just average. That doesn't mean everybody, but if an individual has, let's just call it tens of thousands of dollars worth of credit card debt and is currently in a house that they have a lot of equity on, there's a strong possibility that they might not want to even take out a home equity line of credit because rates are high, or they might not even qualify for a home equity line of credit. Have you ever thought about the possibility, and again, this is just something I thought about the other day, and I haven't even worked through it, but have you thought about the possibility of creating a seller as well as a buyer by finding an individual who may have gotten a little over their head with credit cards, right? So now they've got a super low interest rate on their mortgage currently. And maybe let's just use round numbers and say they're paying $2,500 a month for their mortgage, but they have another $1,000 a month that they're paying on their current credit cards. So their total monthly expense between their mortgage and their credit cards is like $3,500.
Today's
right?
mortgage, yeah.
So they could sell, take the equity, pay off all of their debt, and potentially even put themselves into a home that's maybe a little nicer or what they want even further. And now you're zero debt. You have a $3,500 mortgage payment, but you're debt-free as far as your credit cards, and you're in a home that you wanted to be in, maybe because of a growing family or whatever your reasoning would be. What are your thoughts about that? I know it's a tough sell to any buyer or seller, but I was thinking about it the other day, and I'm like, I wonder if real estate agents and lenders alike could make something like that work.
That's an interesting question. The great thing about it is they're equity rich. So
Right.
they have options, right? They could even pull a home equity loan and stay in the property that they're in because it's been performing so well.
Right.
Or they can, like you said, change. Things change. They might want a bigger yard. They might want that from that 2-story to 1-story.
Right.
The great thing is that they have the option. So I would never keep them from making a choice if they had the option. And now if you don't have an option, that's a big different story. But the great thing is being that homeowner, you're in a better position than a consumer that was in an apartment with all that credit card debt.
Right. Well, and that's kind of my point. You're on the front lines, right? You're talking to people before they typically connect with me, even though that's probably not the way it should be. People typically don't want to deal with any of the financing stuff until they really know that they have a house that they like or whatever, or that they're full in on buying. But I'm thinking as a real estate agent, as far as like somebody who may want to upgrade or anything along those lines, and they're having those kind of general conversations like you talked about, where it's like, how is the market? Maybe identifying a potential buyer and seller who really wants to move out of their house because whether it be it's outdated, it's too small, maybe they just have aspirations to get into a larger home, but they're also carrying this credit card debt. I don't know the answer to this, but I don't know if buyers know or even thought about, just kind of like the blueprint that I brought up in terms of
It's a
like,
lifeline.
well, right. And I think a lot of times people kind of compartmentalize a difference between their mortgage debt versus their credit card debt. And there's a little bit of a difference, but at the end of the day, it's all debt.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're currently, paying $3,500 a month between your mortgage and your credit card debt, and you're doing it, and, it's not ideal because you're pumping money away to a credit card, but why not just sell, take your equity, buy a new home? Just food for thought and kind of an option for any potential person who maybe didn't think about that. It was one of the things I was thinking about the other day, and I'm like, how do we do like a public service announcement on that? I don't know.
Man, that's a good question because
Right.
I don't even know how I would put that.
Well, yeah, because then you have to assume like, you as a real estate agent don't want to say, hey, do you have a bunch of debt? Like, are you carrying a bunch of
Are you
credit
in the
cards?
hole?
Right, right. So yeah, I don't know. It's just like, it's a topic I wrote down and wanted to chat with someone about it and just kind of wanted to get your take on it. So think about it later too. Maybe we can come up with something to where we can get the word out there. If you're
Some
carrying some debt, use your
content
equity
creation.
and upgrade.
And it's funny you said that because this is almost the second. This is today on my way over here. The call that made me 6 minutes late.
Mhm.
We were having that conversation. It's a teardown. It's been passed over to the family. Will be the second gen.
Mhm.
So they've lived in the Dove Springs area for years, right?
Okay.
Everybody else is tearing down, and they're the last one standing. And they're like, Bianca, it's hot. It's hot in this house, and we're ready to sell. And I was like, okay, well, what is keeping us from moving forward? I know what it is, and they know what it is, which is the credit card debt.
Mhm.
So I told them, cash is king in this kind of market. So if you can, pay yourself out of your debt, and then you can go still potentially buy yourself something that's majority of it's cash. They're still
Mhm.
gonna have like 300,000 to put down. So I'm like, you know what you need to do.
Right.
You just have to, I think, tell yourself that you have, like, before you make a decision to make a jump, you have to mentally prepare and make the decision internally before you make the move. So I
Sure.
feel like we've had the conversation for 2-3 years already. She knows what she needs to do. It's just taking the internal decision.
Do you think a lot of it is just like kind of what I mentioned, that compartmentalization of
It
like
is.
debt, where it's like, oh, I want to
You
take
know
this
why?
money and put it towards my house. I don't want to pay off my credit cards.
This is why I think what my reasoning why is they regret even getting in that debt.
Mm-hmm.
That T-shirt or that car wasn't even worth
Right.
the value of what you're getting in. Your house was such an easy gain,
Yeah.
and your debt was such a stupid loss.
Mm-hmm.
So
So it's just it's a hard pill to swallow.
it's a hard pill to swallow that credit card debt got you this far in the hole that, your house is not on the line, but it's what's going to save you.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And I don't know. Yeah. And again, I see it probably more than you do.
Yeah. You see the numbers.
Well, yeah. And it's interesting
Yeah.
because once again, I'll literally watch people that will, when we qualify people, the minimum monthly payments on credit cards obviously is baked into your debt to income ratio. And I see a lot of times where, we're kind of a little tight on like what we can approve somebody for. And so the first question is, well, what if I put down more money, right? Can I approve for a higher loan amount if I put down more money? And mathematically, I mean, the short answer is yes. But where we actually can decrease that debt to income ratio pound for pound way more than putting money down on a mortgage is by paying off some of the credit card debt. Because, here we might have a $5,000 credit card, and that's what they owe on it. That minimum monthly payment's like $250 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you put down $5,000, what are we going to reduce your payment by? Like $60, $50 a month? So you can see, because again, we're stretching something out over a 30-year timeline typically.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see how it's just dollar for dollar is way better to pay off that debt and put less money down. But there are people that are just like,
Dragging it out.
well, they just don't, for whatever reason. It's just like, I can't believe, I would rather put this money towards my house than put it towards this debt. And again, I think it's just like, I think you kind of like, you're spot on. It's like, I hate these credit cards. I don't want to pay them. And something about putting a down payment towards my mortgage seems more responsible. And it is if you don't have any debt.
Yeah.
But it's, you know what I mean? But it's like, you're here. It just makes so much more sense. And again, going through some coaching and kind of like showing what that looks like, typically people are like, all right, that makes sense. Like, it reminds me of the refinance days. I used to do a lot of refinance business, and we would have people that, they wouldn't want to pay off their debt. They just wanted to lower their interest rate. So like, they have a 7% interest rate, and we were able to take it down to like 5%. And we're like, listen, if you're going to do this refinance and pay for all of these closing costs, you've got all of this equity in your property, you really should pay off like the $40,000 worth of credit card debt you have. And people would say, no, I'm going to pay that off on my own. I don't want to use the equity in my property. And it's like, how long have you had this debt? And what's the plan to pay it off? And like,
It sounds like something you just want to shove in the closet and just.
yeah. I mean, I'm sure you want to pay it off, but like, what does that look like?
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. Just something.
I think dealing with it like right then and there is better. I mean, that's where I don't 100% agree with Dave Ramsey on a lot of the things. I've taken the class and I've scratched my head.
Yeah.
Especially when he talks about the credit, like your credit not being a number, like you don't, it's.
Right. No credit score loans and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes. And so that was the part where I was like, okay, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like I took the class, but at the same time, I believe in the snowball effect. I do believe in that one. So I feel like that's one piece out of the 13-week course.
Yeah.
That I took, or there was a couple pieces, but that was the one that hit me the hardest.
Yeah, I read the book just to have food for thought, because I had so many people that were calling me and then being like, have you read Dave Ramsey's book? And it was like after 5 people had said something, I'm like, okay, I just have to do this. So I can't be the guy that just says no, I haven't. So I did. And there's some good pieces of advice nuggets in there, but I don't think
some are unrealistic, but some.
Yeah, no, I would agree. So, just moving on to keep things flowing,
Mm-hmm.
We've kind of talked about some of the things that you're doing to generate new business, staying in front of your sphere of influence, kind of doing some of the marketing stuff. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on that you feel like you have maybe pivoted since things have slowed down?
Yeah, I think nobody will notice this, but I kind of hit a rut as well.
Okay.
With the market. And so I had to have a mindset change. So I changed my circle of influence big time. I went from by myself to in front of everybody. And that's not just my day-to-day clients. It's actually like the real estate agents that are pounding the pavement with me.
Right.
So I feel like in this market, and this is not 2008, but
no.
Every time you sit with somebody that was in the market of 2008, they're very optimistic on it. I was there. Yeah. You guys are like really optimistic on it. And for me to see that just to get to hear we're going to be okay. Just keep doing what you're doing. This is how you gain market share is what drives me. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, I can't believe I get to witness, another part of history. That the market was at a standstill. People were making moves. 2008, people that were buying the properties had capital gains. They're the ones right now that are probably $1 million, homeowners, because they utilized that market. When everybody else was peeling out, they were the ones that stayed, that stuck it through.
Sure.
So I feel like as a real estate agent, I want to be the one that stuck it through, not the agent that's had their license for 20 years and stepped out in those years that people actually needed us and then stepped back in and they were like, oh, I was in the market in 2008. And I'm like, really? What did you sell? Because you're asking me the simplest things right now that you should know off of experience.
Well, and that's, I'll tell you one of the things. There's quite a few differences between now and 2008, but one of the major ones that I think about a lot is that, again, we're still able to lend, right? There was a pretty good amount of time when like lending in general took a halt. So even if there was individuals that, at least right now, one of our obstacles obviously is that, we're having difficult times trying to get in front of as many buyers as we can. People are concerned because of the uncertainty, right? But that's really our only obstacle. I mean, because before I can remember we had, potential buyers that were looking to move forward, and it was like banks just were not lending money because things just got so crazy, and it was almost, you want to talk about a standstill. It was a standstill of clients and a standstill
Well,
of money.
yeah. And if we stop and we think about it, let's put a microscope on 2001 or 2011,
Yeah.
2021. Nobody was buying anything. I think it was like the month of June, I think, where everybody was out not doing anything, not
Right.
spending at all, because we did have a small, like, quiet crash.
Yeah,
Or
for a minute.
yeah, and they called it a recession. And the thing is, I know what I did. I went to go shop for a vehicle because at that time, that's where I can maximize my negotiations with
Right.
the sales rep. And I was like, if it was just this is like a $30,000 purchase. If I capitalized on a $30,000 purchase back then, imagine what you could do with a house now. So it's like, I don't know. Just those when everybody's not moving because of fear, that's when you should move.
Right. No, there's something to that. I mean, you touched on some of the things you're doing differently, the pivots, the getting, changing the sphere. What do you think are what are the big pain points right now outside the obvious? I mean, high rates, right? Is there anything that you kind of are experiencing more so now in the last couple of months than normal that you would point out? And if so, what is it? And if not, what's something that you're seeing a lot of clients coming and mentioning that are a pain point that you feel like you're answering all the time?
I think it's the sticker shock, right? The sticker shock that it's so cheap. The houses are more affordable now, but the payments still don't make sense to them,
Right.
just because they just witnessed a 3 to 7,
Yeah.
within
The affordability.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting about that is, like, as a lender, I think about it all the time. I mean, when interest rates came down, I thought, oh my gosh, this frees up so much affordability. And I don't think people really recognized how much, we as lenders say this, what I'm about to say, all the time. And I feel like we get the biggest eye roll. And it really is, I'm not saying that your purchase price doesn't really matter, but what's most important is what your payment is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so at that time, we're watching property values go up. And I can remember people saying things like, I would never pay this amount of money for the property. But then if we really had the opportunity, we could say, but look at what this monthly payment is going to be, even at this amount that you would, in your mind, never, ever pay for this property, versus exactly what you're saying now, which is, okay, now I'm starting to see things come down to what I feel is a little bit more of a realistic level. However, the payment is even higher than what it was when the purchase price was higher.
Right.
And that's a tough pill to swallow, but it really is about the payment.
I think it's almost like double dutch, right? If you can't catch the rhythm, just jump in and get on rhythm. And once you get in, the next person that gets in, they're going to have to get on the rhythm as well.
Yeah.
And that's just what it's like getting in real estate. Like, at some point, we have to accept it for what it is and just jump in the rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
And once we do, I mean, I bought my first house in 2017. And back then I was like, whoa, we're paying like this much for this little house or whatever. Now that house is such a bargain. Like, it's a 5-bedroom house in Buda, and it's twice the price of what we purchased it at, even after the correction.
Wow.
In our market. So I'm like, I'm not letting that one go. Like, that was, people were thinking that we were crazy for buying it back then, but now looking back at it, I'm like, I jumped in. It was a double dutch that I just jumped in rhythm and kept going.
And you're glad you did.
I'm glad I did. And it turned it into a rental property. And the one that we're living in right now is going to be another rental property. So
very nice.
Yeah. And this one I bought in October, which I really, and that's the thing, is I keep looking back at October versus today's market, because that's when they started rolling out the incentives, right? Sellers and builders and things like that. And I was like, wow, I got a good interest rate. I got a 4.4 interest rate. Now you're looking at a 6, and the pricing of my house has dropped. I think it was like maybe $40,000. But if you look at it side by side, it's the same thing.
Right.
It's almost the same thing. So what I tell myself is,
you mean as far as the monthly payment? As
far as the monthly payment, and even if you look at the difference in both, like, would I rather a house $30,000 cheaper, or would I rather a house $30,000 more expensive with a cheaper interest rate?
Mm-hmm.
No, I still couldn't tell you which one I would pick. I think I'm just gonna roll with it and let
and they
time
almost
do
iron out to be pretty close to begin with.
It's really close.
So, and then if you do have an opportunity where you can refinance, it'll be there. And if interest rates don't end up going down that much, you're just going to see the appreciation.
Right. And if we just drop 1%, I'm good. My decision was great, and I know that it's going to. So I'm like, I don't care at this point. Even in at that, I had to. The only difference for me was I had to go from a 5-bedroom to a 4-bedroom house, and we lost 500 square foot, which I don't care. I really don't
Right.
care. I like the idea of us being uncomfortable because it makes us make another move
There you
in the
go.
future. So I feel like anybody in this market that's wanting to. A lot of people have their they're like absolute don'ts and what they would probably purchase. I would say get something in the middle, like something you don't want to be too comfortable in there because
Yeah.
you want that to be a rental property. So I would say just find something that you're okay with, not happy with. I would never want to be happy in my home until it's my very last home.
Sure. No, I understand what you're saying. So, forgive me, I should probably know this, but do you feel like and again, just organically, maybe not what you want, but are you running more buyers or are you doing more listings right now?
Anything I can get my hands on.
Right. But what seems to be happening?
Sellers.
Sellers?
Mhm.
Okay. And so do you run into a lot of situations recently where you're dealing with sellers that maybe are a little unrealistic about what they think their home could sell for nowadays? Or are people finally starting to recognize that, things are cooling off? Like, what does that look like for you?
So I think they recognize what their home's valued at. They've seen, like I said, the correction when the
Mhm.
market corrected. Now they're having a hard time accepting it. But when they accept it, they're like, okay, now we got to do work. In the last 3 years, we didn't have to do anything. We just
Yeah.
threw a tag on it and it was sold.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have to do work.
Yeah.
You have to, make sure that your house stands out. So I feel like the honeydews is really what the pain point is for people right now. And they're like,
Okay.
you mean to tell me we have to paint, the interior, we have to do updating?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you do.
Right.
Because
So how are those conversations recently? I mean, are people like, I would envision that when you're doing your listings, are they just automatically 100% going with you, or have you run listing appointments where they're kind of thinking about it, they're not sure, and you kind of have to have that tough conversation?
I think it's having the tough conversation, but also I always end my appointment with another showing for them.
Okay.
They need to walk through that property to see, what 450 looks like. And if they're wanting to sell their house for 470, 480,
Mm-hmm.
if their house doesn't compare to 450, we got some work to do. And so I think that's the reality that I'm showing them, is showing them, actually letting them walk through the property and seeing what needs to be done, to where they're like, you know what, this is not bad. The faucets, we can change that. That's $100, or whatever. Lighting, all that stuff. These are, they're affordable changes, but make a big difference, especially when it's that buyer that's buying in today's rate at a 6-7%. You have to make it. You have to make it to where it's a good decision for them too. They have to feel good about their decision.
So to be clear, because I think that's, if I'm hearing you correctly, I think that's genius. So you're taking a client, for example, that let's just, again, just to use a round numbers, says that they're trying to get $500,000 for their home, right? Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to buy a $500,000 house. They may be upgrading, they may be downgrading, but you're encouraging them to go take a look at a couple of other $500,000 homes that are kind of close in the area that are comparable, to get a feel for what that looks like.
Right.
To get to ultimately say to them, hey, someone could walk into your home with it listed at $500,000, but here's what another $500,000 listing looks like.
Right.
And you feel that really is kind of an eye opener to them, because either A, they're like, oh, we're good, like this house isn't as nice as ours, or they're like, geez, I'd really rather have this home than our home.
I just shut
like
up.
that.
As soon as they walk in the property, I'm like, let the house do the talking. I'm like, this is it. And they'll look back and they're like, you know what? The pricing of remodeling that restroom is not really that bad. And I really like this restroom. So I think, yeah, can you send us some contractors over? I'm like, yeah.
No, I think that's
Yes.
really smart. I mean, I've heard, we've had other agents in here who have really said that they've had some tough conversations with sellers that are a little unrealistic. And, it's been, for lack of a better term, an awkward conversation. But why even have to show photos or comparables? It's like, hey, let's go take a quick drive. There's 3 homes in the neighborhood that are all listed right around what you're trying to list for, and you can make an apples to apples comparison. Like, don't take my word for it.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's strong. Any other things like that you feel like you're doing that other people aren't? Or, I mean, even that right there, do you feel like other agents are doing that, or is that something that you think you're doing that no one else, not no one, but a lot of others aren't doing?
I'm curious to know who else is doing it.
I don't know anyone else who's doing that. I think that's great.
Yeah, I just was trying to think for a while. And because the only way I came up with that idea was trying to get them off the fence on selling by showing them the ideal home that they want to purchase. But when I found out that we were hitting a hurdle in between list price and market value, that's where I felt like I was like, okay, you know what? There's an issue right here. I need to figure out how to clear the gap, how to bridge it, which was walking the property.
No, I like that.
So I try and reverse engineer some things. Like if I see an issue that's ongoing, I will literally take notes to myself and think on it. Think on how can I help this situation better? What could I have done better on this conversation?
No, I like
how can
that.
I be in front of it?
And then any you say you're doing more listings right now, but what's the maybe I should do it across the board. What is the question that continues to come up, or what is the public service announcement that you want to give to either your buyers or sellers, that if you could just make a blanketed statement like, hey, instead of asking this question so much, here's the answer?
That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, what are you getting asked all the time that you think like, why am I getting asked this question so much? I mean, outside of how's the market?
Oh my gosh. I think one of the things is there's a lot of home buyers that have bought in the last 2-3 years, and they're already getting antsy. They're ready to sell. They always ask me, so when do you if I cannot profit off my property, because I guess with the correction, they lost out the equity that they had, that window, right? That small window that they had within the last 2-3 years, because they gained it and then they lost it, and now they're pretty close to what they purchased it at. And after commission splits, it's either negative or equal. So a lot of home buyers, home sellers are asking me right now, when would be a good time to sell? And I give them 2 options. I always try to give options on anything anybody asks me. I try to give them 2 options, and I told them, well, you either need to gain an extra like 30, 40,000 to where you're actually profiting, or we need this interest rate to drop to this, and that's how you'll instantly get what you're wanting.
Right.
And so I always, so I think one thing I'm telling them is, you don't even have to call me. You could see it yourself when you see the mortgage rates drop. So when they see the mortgage rates drops, that's when they know it's time for them to call me so we could put on the market.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting when we start to see things come down. But I know from experience, you kind of talked about the 08 years and everything along those lines. And heck, we even saw this during COVID, where I hate to say it, but I'm warning you, when these interest rates come down, about 80% of the buyers are gonna go, I'm gonna hold off and see if they'll get lower. It's crazy.
But
it's crazy.
And I know they're going to do that, but the thing is preparation.
Yeah.
We got to be ahead of that before they have that. When they start giving me those rebuttals, I'm going to say, what happened last time we wait? There's one person that comes up in my head every time, this one guy, and he's like, I'm just going to see. And then maybe like 6 months later, he's like, oh, I'm going to see. And I'm like, we've already seen for the last 2-3 years. Whenever that does happen, what are you going to do? I want to ask him now in advance. How do I know that you'll make that decision? And he's going to tell me that interest rate. And I'm like, okay, well, what if it doesn't? And what if it doesn't?
Yeah. Well, we've been calling that the strike point. We've been asking clients on our end, and I think real estate agents should do the same. Like, what is that strike point? And that strike point needs to be something that you have to be kind of held accountable for, because if we get to that point, we've got to move. And then just like now, and this is all, this isn't a prediction here, but hypothetically, if interest rates move point, for example, a percentage point down, and that's a realistic strike point for buyers to move forward, they can get in that market. And then if they go even lower, you can always refinance.
Yeah.
Right? You can always refinance, but we need to know what your strike point is so that, when that happens, we can make it happen.
What do you think about 0.5?
0.5 what?
Of a drop.
I don't think it'll make a difference.
You don't think so?
No, and here's why. I talked about this last week with another agent, and this was kind of the point I was getting at with you. When we see interest rates drop, you're going to be shocked at the amount of people that will say, well, I want to see if they go lower. I truly believe as salespeople, I think sometimes, especially real estate agents more than lenders, and you kind of even brought it up, was like, we have to remember that we are salespeople. We don't need to be like grimy salespeople or anything along those lines. But one of the things about sales is doing a good needs assessment, right? Figuring out exactly what it is that the buyer is actually wanting. And then furthermore, what it is that a buyer or seller is actually like having an issue with that they're not telling us. And so I think there's a lot of people that aren't buying or selling, and they're telling themselves and us that it's because of rates and affordability. But I'm here to tell you from a financial standpoint, I run into a lot of people who can purchase.
Mm.
They're just not doing it. They're saying it's because of interest rates. They're saying it's because of affordability. But and it's client specific, of course. But as I do a deeper dive, I start to recognize that there's some other underlying issue as to why they're not really serious about buying or selling.
Details.
Right. Well,
I'm excited.
Well, and then from there, some of it is just like one of the bittersweetnesses of our job is that buying a home is exciting. It's fun. It's a change in your life, and so on and so forth. And I really do think that there's a lot of people out there that enjoy the idea of buying or selling. It's a fun conversation for them. It's like,
it's as important as getting married, graduating college. It's an accomplishment.
right. So there's people out there that just kind of like to talk about it, right? They like to almost like dream about it and think about it, when in reality, when it comes down to the actual, like, I mean, let's face it, like, moving isn't fun.
No.
Right?
No.
And, going through the entire process, although can be fairly painless, it's not as easy as not doing anything. So, yeah, some of these deeper dives that I find out, really a lot of them stem from some things that we can overcome, right? Like I've had instances where people have lived in their primary residency for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and their biggest fear was that they thought they were going to have to pay capital gains. So they had to think about, like, what does this look like when I make this money? And then what am I going to have to pay on it when we turn around and say, if you've held this property for over 24 months as a primary residency, you don't have capital gains on this. Not a CPA, consult one. So, but again, that's just an example. And then all of a sudden people are like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. So I am always trying to, like, get a deeper dive as why somebody's not doing things right now. Because sadly, I find more often than not that there's really nothing that you're going to tell this person. They just are using, because let's face it, we had historically low interest rates. Oh, I don't want to get into a multiple offer situation, right? We're no longer in multiple offer situations. Oh, I don't want to purchase at a 6.5%, right?
That's the same person that you're talking about is the same one I'm talking about for the last 3 years that could have afforded it and that still can afford it and
Right.
hasn't made that.
And what I envision is that there's something else that's, that they're not telling you, whether it's, I run into situations.
Approval issue, you think?
Well, no, I mean, that could be, I
Yeah.
mean, if they don't have a pre-approval from a lender and a lender hasn't actually seen what that financial picture looks like, that's a red flag.
Right.
Right. I mean, why, and of course they're going to tell you they're good for it and this and that.
Yeah.
But if no one else is going to validate that, that's a red flag. I've run into instances where, I see this with single men a lot, where it becomes this situation where it's like, well, I'm a single guy, and what I really want to do is I really want to meet a girl, and then we're going to buy a house together. But then it kind of turns into one of those things like, dude, you live in a 3-bedroom house with your boys. Like, the girl you're looking for doesn't respect you. But that's like a whole nother, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, it's that whole thing like, well, when this happens, I'll do this. But then it's like, well, that's not going to happen if you don't do this type of thing.
And I think, and that goes for life, right?
Sure.
Like,
100%.
a lot of people want to finish college before they have their firstborn. Well, shit happens,
Right.
So I feel like don't ever be contingent on your checklist. Just follow whatever. Just knock it out. It's not going to go in perfect order.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I'll start eating healthy once I start working out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, why not just start eating? Why don't you start working? Like, they go together.
Yeah.
Right. So I see a lot of that with buyers, and yeah, I think that's especially now more than ever. And this is a statement that needs to be made across the board as far as real estate and all of that. We are salespeople. We need to do that deeper dive and really figure out what it is that's holding them back. And, the comment that I've been making lately that I really, there's going to be a video of me coming out talking about this, and I'm half joking, but it's like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of talking about, like, financial freedom, building equity, not paying rent, forced savings account in a home, all of the, like, things that we talk about as real estate professionals.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost done bringing it up. My public service announcement was buy a house for your kids and for your dog.
that's a huge, like, there's so many people that have bought, houses for their dogs. That's what's crazy
Well, I think we
is that they
forget
would.
about that. Like a house
That's,
is something you need. You do get to live in it,
yeah.
and it is directly correlated with like your quality of life. You're gonna live there. You spend a lot of time there. You raise your family there.
And you make money doing it.
You have holidays there. But yeah, forget it because you know what? How many people, kind of like we've talked about, where you can show all of the financial benefit associated with home ownership, and it doesn't seem to like make a difference whatsoever. It's like, why don't you create some memories, live your life, have your family over for Christmas,
Hmm.
stuff like
Back
that.
to the basics.
Right. Like I think we've somewhat forgotten that, there's more to home ownership than just the
Fun.
equity in your property and what it appraises for and
Yeah,
all of that.
I agree.
So,
I definitely agree. I think for me, this is so bad, but for me, like, I'm an analytical person, so I
mhm,
love numbers. So for
sure.
me, it was all beneficial from buying the house for the kids, having the holidays. We were homeless growing up. We were on government housing, moving.
Mhm.
So for me, it's deeper from that. But the thing, what I feel like is promising is financial stability for my kids in the future. If
Right.
something were to happen to us, I'm literally laying the pavement for them to where if all hell breaks loose, they have at least this. So I feel like that's what it stems from is
Yeah.
having those holidays, all that stuff.
Well, I got a couple more for you and then we'll work on kind of wrapping this up, but so I try to always ask the question, and you can do this either on the buy side or the seller side. So, as an example, the last agent that I had in here talked a little bit about option money because she identified that one of the things that she was seeing basically that clients maybe didn't know is that you can actually go and write an offer on a property, and for as little as a couple $100, you could just decide you don't want to buy the place anymore.
Hmm.
And people are like, wait, what do you mean? Because a lot of buyers think that once they sign that contract and that contract gets accepted, that's it.
Hmm.
Like, show's over. All we got to do is wait for closing. There's no way to get out of this. There's no, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So option money was one of the things that we touched on. Is there anything in regards to the sale of a property or the purchase or the purchase on the buy side of the property that you seem to find clients going, oh, wow, I didn't know that?
Um, After purchasing or
Well, I was thinking during. So, like,
during?
I'll give an example of one, and
Yeah.
maybe you run into this. Um, how quickly do your buyers have to have their earnest money in? For example, I mean,
Oh yeah.
I see agents chasing people down from time to time for earnest money.
That is more challenging than the contract itself.
Right.
Is knowing how
So,
responsible the consumer
for
is.
the people that are out there, why don't you go ahead and just explain to us what earnest money is, where it needs to go, why it's important, and all of that stuff? There's your public service announcement then if you're chasing people around. What's that
Yeah.
look like?
So earnest money is goes alongside. It's due. So option money you have 3 days, right? Earnest you have 7 days, and this depends. Every contract's differently,
Yeah, it's
but
negotiable.
typically we'll do 7 days. But for the most part, we like to run these together. Um, uh, Put it with the escrow officer as quick as possible. But what earnest money does is you're just showing the seller that you're financially stable and that you're dead serious on purchasing this property. So if you're willing to just put down 1% or 3%, that makes a big difference between the 1 and 3.
Hmm.
And so then at that point, I think the bad part about it is the seller thinks that money's automatically theirs,
Right.
but it's more enticing for them to see, like, hey, this guy's willing to put, 10,000 down when all we asked for was 3.
Hmm.
So it shows them that it's more promising to them that they're going to get to closing knowing that you're not beating around the bush and you mean business and you want to close just as much as they do. So
And why do you think it's difficult from time to time to get the potential buyer to get that money over to the title company and get that in escrow?
it's almost as a big deal as closing. They think of it as they're closing on the house. That's, sometimes when you make a big purchase and you don't know whether, I think one thing is consumers don't read contracts. So they think that it's done. Like
Right.
you said, they think they're already closing on the property.
Hmm.
And not only that, they're scared that money may not come back.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about it may or may not come back. I mean, if I'm a potential buyer, I find a house, I love it, right? And you're like, Matt, we can write a contract. All you need to do is, you know, how much time do you need to kind of think about it? We'll put up a couple $100, and then after those couple of days go by, maybe I want to get an inspection. Now it's time. You call me up and you're like, you need to send over that earnest money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm just so busy, right? Because every buyer is just so busy. And you're like, no, Matt, seriously, like you have to have this over, otherwise it's gonna create an issue. And I don't flat out say it to you, because if I do, it kind of makes me sound like wishy-washy. But I'm thinking like, I don't really want to give up on this money, because what if I decide that I don't want to go through with this, or is that money just gone? And I think this is something we run into.
That's our responsibility then,
Right.
is telling it before it happens.
I think so too. And I think a lot of people, they don't want to ask the question though. And we assume
They know.
that they know.
Right. Because we
And
do it all day, every day. And
Right.
so I think if before, okay, so they like the property, you're walking through it. What are the next steps? You always, I think anytime we end a conversation with our clients, no matter what, here are the next steps. You know, hey, you like the property? Here are the next steps. Hey, you want to list your house? Here are the next steps.
Mhm.
Always end off with the next steps, because you don't want them to call you at 10 o'clock at night and they're arguing and they're trying to figure out what they just signed or
Right.
where they're going. So I feel like it's really important for us to end any call that we have with our clients. Here are the next steps. Even after closing, here are the next steps. Homestead exemption, you know, whatever.
Yep.
So I feel like all the way until it's done, it's said and done, there should always be next steps. So I think at that point is just be ahead of the curve.
So we've got to let the buyer know, you know, as far as earnest money is concerned, that number one, you know, if it's in the contract that you have to have this at a specific time, number one. Number two, by not sending in your earnest money doesn't get you out of the contract,
Mhm.
right? Because now that you've got me thinking, maybe somebody does have cold feet or whatever, and they think, well, maybe if I don't send this over, it's a way for me to get away with something. And then I
Non-committal.
think also one of the things that we think everybody knows, but maybe we just need to say it, is that your earnest money goes towards your actual cash to closing amount. It's not money that you're giving to the seller. It's just money that you're giving to the title company to hold in good faith to show that you're going to follow through.
So I think at that point, we should just assume that they didn't read the contract.
Right.
Let's just assume they didn't read the contract and go line over line what we're submitting as an offer. And if they do, always say the what ifs, right? They
Yeah.
can say yes, they can say no, they can counter offer. And so before I submit the offer, I'm saying, hey, let's prepare for the what ifs. If they say no, or if they reject, or they counter offer, how do you want to address this? And they're saying like, go all in, or you know, we'll just walk. And I'm like, okay. So I know there's no surprise when we put that offer in, and either it gets accepted or counter offered. There's no surprise on this end, because I already told you this is what the possibility is.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it is. We can just assume that they don't know. And honestly, just even if they're a 3 time buyer, assume they don't know, because, you know, going through the process is pretty quick, and they'll say like, I've been through this before, but they will forget.
I run into it all the time. You know, there's always the guy that contacts me, and the very first words out of his mouth is, I have enough money to buy this house in cash. I'm just going to, you know, I'm financing it so I can keep my money in the market. We kind of move through the process, and I try to be as informative as I possibly can. And then I get like a, hey, buddy, I've done this before.
And then
I'm
they
like, okay.
call you,
Yeah,
you
and then
know.
all of a sudden it's like, I haven't seen this in the last time I purchased. So I try really hard to be as informative as I can to avoid stuff like that. But I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And, you know, I think buyers as well, like, there's no reason to feel like you don't know what's going on. There's no reason also to assume that you do. Like, you have a real estate professional that works for you. Ask questions and make sure you understand everything. And yeah, make sure you get your earnest money to title as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Or your agent will chase you down and go deposit it for you.
right. Yeah, exactly. So with that being said, I typically, I always like to open it up. And again, if there's no questions, that's okay. But, you know, any questions that you have that you wanted to ask a lender, things that you've been thinking about, you know, things you've been hearing in the market that you either want to get validated or not.
Yeah. So, like I said, I think in this market, a lot of homeowners that have owned prior to the 2-3 years,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in the 4 or 5 year range, they're wanting to become landlords.
Yep.
And I wanted to see what options do they have as home equity goes.
Yeah.
Even though they've already rented out that, like, let's just say in my position, you know, we're on the second property,
Mm-hmm.
but we never touched the equity on the first.
I got you.
And I feel like that's a gold mine that we need to dig into to do it again.
It can be. I mean, you know.
But I don't know if we already messed up by renting it out, because we could have done it while we lived in the property. What could we do now that it's already...
Well, whether you live in the property or not, I mean, it does make a little bit of a difference, but it really just comes down to the numbers, right? And so, like, I'm glad you asked me this, because I see a lot of, like, TikToks and stuff like that, and there's these lenders that are like, oh, yeah, and then they're going to take out this equity line of credit, and that's what they're going to use for their new down payment, and then they're going to put this as their down payment, and then everything's going to be all right in the world because they're going to rent this back, and the rent's going to pay for the mortgage, and it just sounds so good, right?
Easy. It sounds
so
easy.
And the truth is that it drives me a little crazy to see some of these videos, because they're not getting into the like actual details in terms of dollars and cents. One of the obstacles that you run into is, sure, okay, you've got the super low interest rate on your current mortgage, but when you take out an equity line of credit, first and foremost, you're going to be capped at a specific loan to value. Mm-hmm. So most companies don't want to exceed what we call a CLTV of 80% loan to value. Okay. And then in addition to that, the interest rates can either be adjustable rates that are fairly high, and then if you want to get a fixed second lien, they're going to be really high. So when we talk about the affordability type of thing, and we look at it like, and again, I'm just going to use magical round numbers. Like if you're paying $2,000 on your mortgage, but then you're taking out the equity in your property, and it's $1,000 for you to obtain maybe, 60, 70 grand, we have a $3,000 overhead expense combined on this home now.
Yeah.
And most of the times what we see is, now that we have this combined amount, that rental property doesn't flow anymore. So now you're in the red, negative on this particular property. You take out, you put your maybe 5-10% down on your new home. And of course, you're getting a rate in the high sixes on that one. And so now we look at it twofold. Like, number one, can you afford that? Right? Can you even afford to
upside down?
Right. Can you afford that? And if the answer is yes, here's the big debate is like, well, now I've got the house that I really, really wanted. I got it in the market where I was able to negotiate. I got it for a good deal, and so on and so forth. And then again, this all comes to, having a crystal ball, right? Like if interest rates drop now and you're able to refinance this property and refinance this property, then you can look back and go, I made a great decision, right? But the first part is, financially, can you afford to do that? In which cases, we've already talked about affordability. And a lot of people, that's the first obstacle that we run into, is like, okay, here's this. And they look at everything and they go, okay, it makes sense because when the rates come down and here's what I'm going to do. And I'm like, you can't afford this. Like, you just cannot afford it.
You're living on a prayer.
Right. You don't make enough money, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. And then the ones that can, okay, now we're doing this, but we're still banking on the fact of interest rates going down. And I believe that they will eventually, but let's face it, like this time last year, we all were pretty confident that interest rates were going to be a lot lower than they are now. Let's just keep it real, right? And I've been the first to admit, like, my crystal ball is completely broken. Like, do I think interest rates will come down? I do believe that, but I have no idea when. And I think that it is, we can all kind of protect ourselves as industry professionals and say, look, rates are going to come down, but we don't know when and this and that. I think it's a little... I don't know. I think it's a little irresponsible to tell people that maybe don't feel comfortable like balancing like two payments like that, even if they can afford it. It's like, hey, are you good with this if it doesn't come down? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And if you're taking somebody who makes a lot of money and they've got, really low debt to income ratio and they're like, I can totally afford this, and they feel confident that worst case scenario, they can still continue to make those payments, then go for it. But I'm here to tell you from a financial aspect, that's probably like 10 to 15% of my clients.
Right.
The clients that are doing this rental stuff typically are clients with big aspirations that, watch maybe one too many TikToks and think that it's super duper easy. And unfortunately, they just don't qualify based on the way that they should. And we can get it done. But like you said, living on a prayer, like, don't put yourself in a position where you're barely making your payments because you're upside down on your rental and you've got your new property now and like you're eating ramen noodles at night, because if it doesn't turn fast enough, you're going to be in a bad position. Like, that scares me. That scares me. That scares me.
Yeah.
But I mean, and again, that's typically how it works out because, going back to these blanketed statements like, oh, yeah, all these people have all this equity. They're going to take out this equity line. I mean, if you take out an equity line right now, you're talking about interest rates that are almost in the double digits. You might as well just go buy your home with the credit card. Like,
that's exactly what I was thinking was credit card
right?
rates.
Like, they are like credit card rates. And here we're continuing to see the Fed increase. So it's like what we qualify you on today might not be your payment 6 months, a year from now.
And then another thing about that is that the rental rates are adjusting as well. That's a moving target.
Yeah.
Did you see that the homeowners insurance, not the homeowners insurance, but the property, what is it? The insurance has increased too.
Yeah, for just
I'm like, what?
Yeah, like hazard insurance.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I meet with a lot of insurance agents. We had one on here a couple of weeks ago, and the reasons for that, I mean, we've had a lot of natural disasters, right? And
Drought.
so when we got to pay out, and when I say we, I mean these insurance companies have these big pools of money. We've had a lot of natural disasters, and then inflation in general is going to affect everything. It's going to affect, the cost of goods, the cost of to rebuild, and everything along those lines. And at the end of the day, let's be real. These insurance companies, they're not charities. Like, profit is not a dirty word. They have to make money. So, yeah, I mean, that's not helping affordability either. So here you've got interest rates that are higher, but then your insurance is higher too. And we use all of that to calculate your debt to income ratio.
So we have a lot of that are. I don't know if a lot of people have seen this, but I've seen tons of either listings or leases, more lease heavy, very lease heavy. But while we're lease heavy in this market, we're also seeing a ton of apartment complexes coming up too. So there's a lot of competition for these homeowners that are wanting to become landlords. And they're already telling themselves they're okay with being $300-$400 under the hole. But my concern is,
what about the taxes? That's my concern.
The taxes increasing. Like I said, we just talked about the insurance going up.
Yep.
Your loss is growing by the minute right now. So I don't know. I just wonder, how much longer do you think they're going to try and obtain this? They're not chasing the market. The
You're
market's
talking about
chasing them.
The rental people?
The landlords. There's
right.
I have like maybe right now probably like 4 or 5 families in my head right now that have put their house on the market for lease, and I told them, "Are you okay with your mortgage being, $2,600 and you're renting this out for $2,300, $2,100?" Yeah, it's fine. We'll be okay. And I was like, okay, your homestead exemption's getting removed.
Yep. That's what I mean on the taxes.
The insurance just went up too. Like, well, yeah, we're okay. And I'm like, whoa. This is nuts. Like,
well, the thing I like about it is, like, for us selfishly, it's a win-win, because either A, you're going to continue to see these landlords to be able to increase rent as their costs go up, and then that will just make the rental market seem more enticing to other people that want to invest. Or the downside, but is also an up for us, is that if municipalities like the county and everything raise taxes because of non-homestead exemptions and everything along those lines, you're going to see these people be forced to sell. Now, granted, they're not going to lose money, right? They're going to make money in terms of profitability, but it's going to become unprofitable to rent some of these properties, and that's just going to free up more inventory for us to sell, because I know a ton of people.
It's going to water down our market a little better.
Well, I know a ton of people that want to buy a house. It's just that, there's not a lot of inventory out there right now. And which kind of brings me, I'm originally from Ohio, and they're about to pass a law right now. Now, this doesn't necessarily touch on some of the smaller, landlords and everything that we're talking about, but this is some of those bigger entities, BlackRock, Vanderbilt, all of these are Vanguard, that are doing all of these investments and buying up all of these homes. I mean, Ohio is about to pass a law that you can't own more than, I believe it's 50 rental properties in the entire state.
Well,
so
I think that's good, because that place I don't know. I know so many real estate agents that are landlords out there.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of good, because then it helps the.
Well, 50 is a big number, right?
Yeah. But at least they put a cap, because those units, what is Ohio, like 150 average price point? Or I know it's under 300 for sure.
It probably right now is like 225.
225,
I would think, I mean, I'm from Cleveland, so I guess it might be a little higher. You might be right, I mean, overall. But yeah, the point I'm trying to make, though, is that you are seeing, because of inventory, you're starting to see certain, at least conversations being had, to discourage landlords. And here's the other thing I do know, and this one came out, and I know I'm going to mess this up, but it's something to the tune of this, is like, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they keep an eye on the number or percentage of home loans that are being done by investors. And I believe what their thing is that I want to say it's something to the tune of like at 30%, when 30% of the transactions are being done as investment properties, they really try to tighten the clamps
Oh, wow.
because they know that that's an unhealthy market, right? I mean, if anyone's going to like foreclose on a property or let something go, you're going to let your investment property go before you're
First.
going to let your primary residency go. And then there's just more excuses. Let's face it, like, oh, my tenants trashed the place, my tenants didn't pay, whatever have you. Because not all landlords are created equal, right? I mean, there's that phrase, slumlords that literally just want to buy a house, they don't want to do anything to it, and they just want to collect rents and hope for the appreciation. And those are going to be the homes that we're going to run into issues with if values get to the point where these, investors are underwater. So I know that we're close to that number. And so, again, going back to my crystal ball being broken, it wouldn't surprise me if being an investor got even more difficult.
Oh, yeah. I definitely see that.
So,
and the hard thing about that is like while we're saying that there's like conflict in that, the city of Austin is making it a little easier. Did you see that they I skimmed through the article, but the minimum for I guess so how they're dividing the lots, it used to be like 5,200 square foot. Now it's like
I know what you're talking about.
Half the lot size, and not only that, the law that just passed for the state of Texas on the taxes, how they're just giving us like for homestead exemption. I guess they're giving like $100,000 break.
Yeah,
and then so I'm kind of like, I feel like we're playing like red light, green light.
Well, they're definitely going to make it easier for homestead exemptions. I mean, that's great news. And again, that helps, home ownership. However, they're going to allow to where you're able to build 2 and 3 unit properties on like smaller lots and stuff like that, so that we can just get more potential home ownership.
Usage of the lots too.
Yeah, that as well. I mean, that's definitely a part of it. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, inventory is going to be an issue for quite some time.
Right.
And, it's one of those things that I know a lot of people that really, they want to buy. And it's kind of a shame, because a lot of the people, they can afford something. It's just so tough. And it's a shame to like almost think, and now I'm just kind of making blanketed statements, but it's kind of a shame to think of like an investor coming in and buying his like 6th house in cash when we have somebody who's like totally able to buy a home and like can't get one because they're getting beat out by like cash investors to turn it into a rental property. But we have somebody who literally wants to live there, raise kids, help the community thrive. And some investor outside of state or whatever is like, oh yeah, we'll pay for it in cash because it's a good option for us. It kind of just, I don't know.
It sucks.
I mean, it's a business, so, part of me is like, well, business is business. But then at the same time, like we talked about, you're buying a home for your family. You're buying a home to raise your children, for the
There's
dog.
so much meaning behind it.
Right. And then to just think that people are like, God damn it, I really want to buy a house, but I can't. And all these investors are coming in and just gobbling up market share. It's kind of sad at the same time.
But I feel like at that point, if it's really that important to you, get smarter and craftier on your financing, right? Like I have a 24-year-old brother that lives, something like that. 24, 26-year-old brother that lives with me. And the longer he's staying with me, the more I'm thinking, we need to get his house on a mortgage with us. Like he needs to help us buy the next property, which is great for him because then he's making equity. And when it comes time for him to actually leave the nest, here's your here's the equity that you've helped contribute to the household. And I feel like I feel like a lot of families, I have been seeing a lot of families do that, not as many. And I think if that was the case, I probably would do that if we were to go back in time.
Well, do you have any other topics you want to cover?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, if not, what I tell everyone to do is do your quick 2-minute elevator pitch, take a look in the camera, let us know who you are, who you work with, and, who you're looking to help, and we'll get you out of here.
Okay. So my name is Bianca Vasquez. I'm a realtor here in Austin, Texas, and my main expertise in this market is helping first-time home buyers, first-generation first-time home buyers purchase in today's challenging market, with us being one of the top 10 tech cities of the world. Investors were flying at one point in and out of Austin just to purchase a piece of property that you guys never had the chance to look at or purchase. I'm here to be boots on the ground, pound the pavement, and see what we can do to get you guys in and change the whole trajectory of your family and the generations to come on just buying one piece of property. There's